The morning air is crisp and serene in the quiet Amish village, a place where time seems to flow at a slower, more deliberate pace. The soft tolling of the church bell ripples through the stillness, calling the community to worship. Sunlight filters through the leafy canopy of the dirt road, painting dappled patterns on the path where Mary walks. Mary clutches her worn Bible, its leather cover polished smooth by years of use. Her steps are deliberate, her head slightly bowed, reflecting the humility her family has instilled in her since childhood. The youngest of 7 siblings, Mary is known for her gentle spirit and unwavering faith, even in the face of personal loss. Her mother's passing a year ago left a quiet ache in her heart, but she has carried on, finding solace in her duties and the teachings of her faith. The village church comes into view, a modest wooden building with whitewashed walls and a steeple that points toward the heavens. It is a place of refuge and connection, a cornerstone of the Amish way of life. Mary quickens her pace, eager to join her family inside, but the tranquility shatters like fragile glass. The distant growl of engines grows louder, invasive and alien against the village's usual silence. Mary's steps falter, her brows knitting in confusion. She turns to see a group of motorcycles roaring into view, their chromed frames gleaming under the sun. The riders are clad in leather jackets, their laughter coarse and loud, a stark contrast to the respectful murmurs of her community. Mary's heart sinks. Outsiders are not uncommon, but the village rarely sees such an aggressive intrusion. The riders, 6 in total, pull into the churchyard, their tires kicking up gravel as they come to a stop. "Looks like we found ourselves a quiet little slice of heaven," one of the men jeers, his voice dripping with mockery. Mary tightens her grip on her Bible, her pulse quickening. She glances toward the church, where the congregation is just beginning to file in. Safety is so close, yet the bikers have positioned themselves squarely in her path. "Hey, little lady," another man calls out, his tone equal parts amusement and malice. "Where are you off to in such a hurry?" Mary lowers her gaze, hoping to pass unnoticed, but the leader of the group, a burly man with a jagged scar across his cheek, steps off his bike and blocks her way. "Don't be rude now," he says, his grin wide and unsettling. "We're just trying to have a little fun." "Please," Mary says softly, her voice steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. "I need to get to church." "Church," the man scoffs, his companions laughing behind him. "What's the rush? Don't you ever just live a little?" He steps closer, and Mary takes an instinctive step back. The warmth of the sun now feels oppressive, the gravel beneath her feet shifting precariously. She can feel the eyes of the congregation on her, but no one moves. The Amish way is one of peace and nonviolence, but in this moment, Mary feels terribly alone. The man's hand shoots out, grabbing her arm. His grip is firm, the leather of his glove rough against her skin. Mary gasps, her composure faltering for the first time. "Let go of me," she says, her voice trembling but resolute. The tension in the air is palpable, like the moment before a summer storm. One of the church elders, an elderly man with a kind face, steps out of the building. His hands are raised in a gesture of peace. "Please," the elder says, his voice calm but firm. "This is a place of worship. We mean you no harm." The leader turns his attention to the elder, his grin twisting into a sneer. "And what are you going to do about it, old man?" Before anyone can react, he shoves the elder back, causing him to stumble. A collective gasp rises from the congregation, and Mary's heart pounds in her chest. She glances around, searching for any sign of intervention. The bikers' laughter echoes in her ears, their mocking tones grating against her sense of decency. Her hands tremble, the Bible slipping slightly in her grasp. And then, through the chaos, a new sound emerges. At first, it's faint, almost imperceptible, but it grows steadily louder, cutting through the din like a beacon. The tolling of distant church bells. The sound is deeper, more resonant than the village's own bell, as though coming from a grander, more ancient place. Mary looks up, her eyes scanning the horizon. The sun catches the steeple of the church, making it gleam like a guiding star. A strange calm washes over her, mingling with a flicker of hope. The bikers pause, their laughter dying down as they too hear the bells. They exchange uneasy glances, their bravado faltering for the first time. "What the hell is that?" one of them mutters, his voice tinged with apprehension. Mary doesn't answer. She takes a deep breath, her fear giving way to something stronger, a quiet, unshakable faith. The sound of the bells grows louder, reverberating through the churchyard with an almost otherworldly power. The bikers shift uneasily, their confidence visibly shaken. Mary stands her ground, her gaze steady as she waits for whatever is coming next. The sound of distant church bells grows louder, reverberating through the tense air of the churchyard. The bikers exchange uneasy glances, their earlier bravado dimming. Mary remains rooted in place, clutching her Bible tightly, her heart pounding as she prays silently for strength. Then, in the distance, the faint hum of an approaching vehicle joins the tolling bells. The sound grows steadily, cutting through the strained silence. Mary turns her head, squinting against the sunlight, and sees a sleek black car with tinted windows cresting the hill. The car is flanked by two security vehicles, their polished exteriors glinting under the sun. The bikers watch, their expressions shifting from confusion to mild amusement. "Looks like someone called the cops," one of them mutters with a laugh. But as the vehicles draw closer, their laughter fades. The black car comes to a halt at the edge of the churchyard, and the insignia on the side catches the light, a golden Vatican crest. The bikers stiffen. The leader, Jake, narrows his eyes and crosses his arms, his posture an attempt to mask his growing unease. "What's this supposed to be?" he sneers. The security detail steps out first, their movements precise and professional. Then, the rear door of the black car opens, and a figure emerges, a man dressed in pristine white robes, his face radiating both humility and authority. It is unmistakably the Pope. The villagers, who had been frozen in fear, now stir with a mix of awe and relief. Some step forward hesitantly, while others murmur prayers of gratitude. Mary's breath catches in her throat. She had dared to hope, but now that hope stands before her, tangible and real. Just a week ago, the Amish community had sent a heartfelt letter to the Pope, inviting him to bless their humble church during his regional tour. The letter had been a collective effort, but it was Mary who had written it, pouring her faith and love for her community into every word. Her father had hesitated at first. "He is a busy man, Mary," he had said, his tone gentle but skeptical. "What are the chances he will come here, to a place so small and hidden?" Mary had looked at him with quiet determination. Faith moves mountains, Dade. If it is God's will, he will come. Now, as she watches the Pope step onto the gravel of the churchyard, she feels a deep, unshakable affirmation of her belief. The Pope walks forward with measured steps, his hands clasped before him. His presence is commanding yet humble, his serene gaze sweeping over the villagers and the bikers alike. The churchyard, moments ago a place of tension and hostility, now feels transformed, as though touched by something sacred. Mary feels her knees weaken, but she steadies herself. The Pope's eyes meet hers, and in that brief moment she feels seen, truly seen, not just as a frightened girl, but as a person of faith and strength. Jake, however, is less moved. He smirks, his bravado returning in the face of what he perceives as theatrics. "What's a holy man like you doing in a place like this?" he jeers, his voice dripping with mockery. The Pope turns to him, his expression unchanging. "I am here to remind us all of the strength in compassion and the courage in faith," he says, his voice calm but firm. Jake falters for a split second, but he recovers quickly. "Compassion? Faith," he scoffs. "What do those ever get you? Look around. The world doesn't care about your little prayers." Mary steps forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "Please," she says, her words directed both at Jake and the Pope. "Let us worship in peace. That's all we ask." Jake's gaze shifts to her, his smirk fading. For a moment, the churchyard is silent, the tension thick in the air. The Pope moves closer to Mary, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. The gesture is small, but it carries immense weight. It is a shield, a declaration of solidarity. "You are brave, my child," the Pope says softly, "and your faith is a light in this darkness." Jake's companions, who had been rowdy and mocking moments before, now appear uncertain. One of them shifts uncomfortably, his eyes darting between Jake and the Pope. "Maybe we should just go," he mutters under his breath. Jake glares at him, but says nothing. The Pope's presence is clearly unsettling, and the gang's confidence is beginning to crack. But Jake is not one to back down so easily. He takes a step closer, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" he growls. "Coming in here with your fancy robes and your big words." The Pope meets his gaze without flinching. "I think we are all equal in the eyes of God," he replies. "And I believe even the hardest hearts can be softened by grace." Mary feels a surge of courage. "Please," she says again, her voice steadier now. "This is a place of peace. Whatever brought you here, it doesn't have to end like this." Jake hesitates, his bravado wavering. The bikers exchange uncertain glances, their earlier unity now fractured. After a long moment, Jake lets out a bitter laugh. "We'll see about that," he says, his tone laced with defiance. He turns to his gang and motions for them to mount their bikes. The roar of engines fills the air once more as the bikers retreat to the edge of the churchyard. But Jake's parting glance is anything but reassuring. His eyes linger on Mary, a silent promise that this isn't over. Mary watches them go, her heart still pounding. The Pope's hand remains on her shoulder, a steadying presence. "Do not fear," he says quietly. "Faith will guide us through what comes next." The sound of the church bells continues to echo, their melody now a hymn of hope and resilience. The bikers don't leave entirely. Instead, they linger just beyond the churchyard, their motorcycles idling loudly. The deafening roar of engines fills the air, disrupting the sacred stillness. Inside the church, the congregation attempts to begin the service, but the incessant noise makes it impossible to hear the hymns or prayers. Children cling to their parents, their wide eyes filled with fear. Mary sits in a pew near the back, her Bible open but unread. Guilt weighs heavily on her. She can feel the uneasy glances from the other villagers, though no one says a word. In her heart, she wonders if her letter to the Pope has brought trouble upon her peaceful community. Outside, Jake and his gang laugh and shout, revving their engines louder and taunting the Amish men and women who dare to look their way. The Pope notices Mary's downcast expression and gestures for her to follow him to a quiet corner of the church. His presence is gentle yet commanding, and Mary feels compelled to confide in him. "I'm sorry," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought inviting you here would bring us peace. But now, I think I've only made things worse." The Pope looks at her with kindness, his expression unwavering. "You did nothing wrong, child. You acted in faith, and faith is never a mistake." "But they're so angry," Mary says, her hands trembling. "What if someone gets hurt because of me?" The Pope places a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Faith does not mean the absence of trials, Mary. It means finding the strength to face them, and you are not alone in this." As he speaks, the villagers begin to gather around them. The Pope's calm demeanor inspires them, and soon a plan begins to form, not one of retaliation, but of peaceful resistance. The men and women of the community, though fearful, resolve to stand together. They prepare to face the bikers, not with violence, but with quiet strength. Later, as the villagers work to reinforce their unity, the Pope sits with Mary and a small group of elders. The tension in the air is palpable, but the Pope begins to speak, his voice steady and reflective. "When I was a young man," he begins, "my family lived in a place where fear and oppression were constant companions. There were those who sought to silence us, to make us feel small and powerless." Mary leans forward, her eyes fixed on him. "What did you do?" she asks softly. "I learned that hatred feeds on fear," the Pope replies. "But love, courage, and unwavering faith can starve it. There was a time when I stood before those who wished to harm us, armed with nothing but prayer and conviction. and though they mocked and threatened me, they could not break me. They could not take away what was within. His words resonate deeply with Mary. She feels a flicker of courage ignite within her, and she knows she must draw upon her faith to stand firm. Outside, the situation grows more volatile. The bikers, frustrated by the lack of reaction from the villagers, begin to escalate their actions. Rocks are thrown at the church windows, shattering the stained glass and sending shards scattering onto the pews. The villagers gasp in alarm, and some of the younger children begin to cry. The elders try to calm them, but the tension is palpable. Jake and his gang laugh uproariously as they tip over carts and scatter supplies. Their behavior becomes increasingly aggressive, their shouts growing louder and more menacing. Eli, Mary's older brother, steps forward from the crowd. He is a young man of quiet strength, but his protective instincts outweigh his usual restraint. "This is enough," Eli says firmly, his voice cutting through the chaos. He approaches Jake, his posture tense but composed. "Leave us in peace." Jake sneers and steps toward Eli, towering over him. "Or what?" he taunts, shoving Eli hard in the chest. Eli stumbles backward but catches himself, refusing to back down. The other bikers jeer, emboldened by Jake's actions. One of them tosses a bat to Jake, who catches it with a grin. Mary watches from the church steps, her heart racing. She wants to intervene, but fear roots her in place. Jake grips the bat tightly and raises it, his expression dark with malice. "Maybe you need a little lesson in respect," he growls, taking a menacing step toward Eli. The villagers cry out in alarm, but before Jake can swing the bat, a figure steps between him and Eli. It is the Pope. He stands tall and calm, his white robes almost glowing in the afternoon sun. His eyes meet Jake's with an unwavering gaze, full of both authority and compassion. "This is a house of God," the Pope says firmly, his voice carrying a quiet power. "You will not desecrate it." The churchyard falls silent. Jake freezes, the bat still raised, as if caught off guard by the sheer force of the Pope's presence. The villagers hold their breath, waiting to see what will happen next. Jake stands frozen, the bat still raised in his hand, his bravado momentarily shaken by the Pope's unyielding presence. The bikers exchange uneasy glances, their earlier confidence beginning to waver. The Pope steps closer to Jake, his voice steady but commanding. "Violence is not strength. It is a mask for fear. What are you so afraid of, my son?" Jake's sneer falters, and he lowers the bat slightly, caught off guard by the question. "I'm not afraid of anything," he snaps, but the edge in his voice betrays him. Mary watches from the church steps, her fear slowly giving way to awe. She can see the doubt flickering in Jake's eyes, the cracks in his tough exterior. Eli, still on the ground, rises to his feet and places a hand on the Pope's shoulder. "We stand together," Eli says firmly, his voice carrying the strength of the entire village. The other villagers, inspired by the Pope's bravery and Eli's resolve, step forward as one. They form a quiet, unarmed line in front of the church, their presence a silent but powerful message. They will not be intimidated. Jake glances at his gang, looking for support, but the bikers seem less certain now. The unwavering faith and unity of the villagers are unsettling, a force they hadn't anticipated. One of the younger bikers mutters, "Maybe we should go, Jake. This isn't worth it." Jake's grip on the bat tightens, but his confidence continues to erode. The Pope takes another step forward, his gaze steady. "It is never too late to choose a different path," he says. "You can leave behind anger and find peace. The choice is yours." For a moment, it seems as though Jake might lash out, but then he lowers the bat completely, tossing it to the ground with a clatter. "Let's go," he mutters, turning away. The other bikers hesitate, but one by one, they follow Jake to their motorcycles. The roar of engines fills the air again, but this time it's the sound of retreat. As the bikers ride away, the villagers erupt into quiet cheers of relief and gratitude. Mary feels tears streaming down her face, a mix of joy and overwhelming emotion. The churchyard is quiet once more, the bikers gone, but the damage remains. Broken windows, overturned carts, and scattered debris serve as reminders of the ordeal. Mary kneels in the grass, helping to pick up the shards of stained glass. The Pope joins her, his presence calm and reassuring. "You were brave today," he says gently. Mary shakes her head. "I was so scared. I didn't do anything." "You stood in faith," the Pope replies. "And that is no small thing. Faith is what gives us courage, even when we feel afraid." Eli approaches, holding a hammer and nails. "We'll repair the church together," he says, looking around at the villagers. "It'll be stronger than before." The villagers nod in agreement, their spirits renewed. The Pope smiles, his heart warmed by their resilience. Over the next few days, the villagers work tirelessly to repair the damage. The Pope remains with them, lending a hand and offering words of encouragement. His presence becomes a source of inspiration, strengthening the bonds within the community. Mary, too, feels a change within herself. The experience has tested her faith, but also deepened it. She realizes that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. As the repairs near completion, the Pope gathers the villagers for a special blessing. They stand together in the churchyard, the sun shining brightly overhead. "This community has shown great strength," the Pope says, "not through force, but through faith, unity, and love. Let this be a reminder that even in the face of adversity, light can prevail." As the Pope prepares to leave the village, Mary approaches him one last time. "Thank you," she says, her voice filled with gratitude. "For everything." The Pope smiles warmly. "Thank you, Mary, for your faith. It was your letter that brought me here." Never underestimate the power of a single act of hope. Mary watches as the Pope's car disappears down the dirt road, a sense of peace settling over her. She knows the village will never be the same, not because of the damage inflicted, but because of the strength they discovered within themselves. That evening, as the villagers gather for a restored church service, the sound of church bells rings out across the fields. Mary sits beside her family, her hands clasped in prayer. From a distance, Jake and his gang watch silently from their motorcycles, their faces unreadable. For a moment, Jake seems lost in thought, his hand resting on the handlebars. Then, with a faint nod, he turns his bike and rides away into the setting sun. In the quiet of the church, Mary smiles. The lesson is clear. Even in the darkest moments, faith and unity can light the way forward.